It's really heartening to see so many of you from Red Plus world all gathered in one place. And I feel like the energy in the room is palpable. We've already gotten off to a great start from the opening remarks from Ernest Edelberg and from Eric Solheim. Eric, I'm going to give you some tips on public speaking after we're finished with this, if that's okay. And a little extra celebrity stardust from Alec Baldwin on the big screen, which is great. And of course, we all owe a huge debt of gratitude to the government of Norway for their leadership, for their generosity, and for their persistence on this agenda. So how many of you attended the first Oslo Redd Exchange in 2011? Raise your hand. Quite a few alumni. How many of you participated in the second Oslo Redd Exchange in 2013? Even more. But for quite a few of you, this is your first experience. Now, for those of you who were here in 2013, you may remember I treated you to a story about going to a basketball game with my mother. Well, today I'm going to tell you a quick story about my father. My father is now 90 years old, and one of the things he enjoys is putting together jigsaw puzzles. So for Christmas last year, my husband and I gave him a present of a 3,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. And this puzzle was of a map of the world, and when completed, it's big enough to cover the entire dining room table. Now, starting out, it was easy. All you have to do is find all the straight-edged pieces and assemble them around in the perimeter, right? Then the next step he had to do is assemble the pieces into big piles for each continent, then assemble the pieces within each continent, and then find a way to connect the continents together. Now, some of the steps were easy. The piece that had the little icon of the Eiffel Tower on it, you know it goes into the Europe pile, and it's going to fit beside the piece that has the little letters of Paris written on it. But most of the icons had icons or place names that weren't very familiar to my father. So when I went down for a visit, I helped him put together Indonesia. And it turns out that he would be able to work on the puzzle about 1 hour every day. And every week in our regular Sunday morning Skype call, he would give us an update on how it was going. Some days, the dog would have knocked a piece on the floor. And after hours of searching for it on the table, he would finally find it. This is the one I was looking for. Other times, he'd discover he'd put a piece in the wrong place and had to undo a section and start over again. And like me, my father is not strong on patience, so he would get very frustrated. But usually he enjoyed this process and would get a sense of satisfaction from watching the shapes take place on the map. Now, I spoke with him on Skype the day before yesterday, and he proudly announced to me that he has now completed assembling all the continents. Took great sense of satisfaction. And he said all he has left to do is fill in the oceans around the continents. And I'm going, it's going to be the hardest part because they're all the same shade of blue. But it seems to me that my father's work on the puzzle provides a nice metaphor for what we're all about in this conference and more generally. Because it's our job to figure out, in mobilizing the forests of the world to protect the climate and promote development, to figure out how all those different pieces fit together. And it turns out that putting together the broad outlines of a mechanism like Red Plus is the easy part, compared to figuring out how to actually make it work in individual places. And while we can orient ourselves around big landmarks like Paris, some of the other places may be more difficult for us to recognize. Sometimes, some pieces may go missing or be misplaced, such as the roles of the private sector, or of indigenous peoples, or of governors, or of women. And if we didn't get it right the first time, we may have to start over again and get it right. But if we're persistent and work through periods of frustration, eventually a picture emerges of how everything fits together. And perhaps the oceans represent the large-scale finance that's necessary to link the different continents. And it could be that that'll be the hardest part. But I encourage you to keep this image in mind as we go into our discussions over the next 2 days and deliberate about how the different pieces of Red Plus can fit together. And like my dad, we can feel very proud of what we've accomplished so far, but also be very aware of the hard work that lies ahead. Now, in order to get you involved in the project of identifying where the pieces of the puzzle fit, we're going to start off with a quick voting exercise. The idea is to force each of you to personally place your vote, express an opinion about the various aspects of Redd Plus that will be occupying us in our discussions over the next 2 days. And unlike the last Oslo Redd Exchange, this time we're going to do it twice, once at the beginning and once at the end. And this is one of those rare aspects of life where you're actually encouraged to change your mind. And so if you've learned something over the course of the 2 days, perhaps you will change your vote tomorrow. Now, the way this works, everyone on your chair or in front of you has this little voting mechanism. And all you have to do when the questions are posed to you is press the button that corresponds to your answer. And when a question and possible answers are flashed up here on the big screen, you will have very limited time to select your answer. In fact, you will not have time to think. So just go with your gut. Now, if you're not sure you pressed the right button or you changed your mind, you can press it again with the confidence that your last choice before the buzzer is the one that will count. So let's get started. Everybody got their voting? Okay. So let's start with some demographic information. That should be some easy questions to help you learn how the system works. First question, how would you identify your primary institutional affiliation? Press 1 if you're from government or multilateral organizations. Press 2 if you're from civil society or academia. Press 3 if you're from the private sector. You have 8 seconds to find the right button. And you see the little clock, the little countdown clock up there in the corner? Yeah. Okay, I think that was an easy one. All right, next question is, going to show us what our demography is? Yes. Oh dear, private sector underrepresented. We got to do better on that one. That's a missing piece, huh? Okay, next question. How would you identify your primary Redd Plus geographic focus or expertise? Press 1 if you focus on or are from Latin America. Press 2 if your focus is on Africa. Press 3 if that would be Asia. Press 4 if you're one of those global citizens who works at 40,000 feet. You have 8 seconds. Okay, let's see where we're from here. A lot of global citizens out there. Okay, Africa underrepresented. Okay, we're going to have to work on that. All right, on to the third question on demography. This should be easy. And then perhaps I should have said, how would you identify your primary gender affiliation? Press 1 for male, press 2 for female. I think we gave too much time for this one. And the gender balance is? Not bad. Okay, well, ladies, we're just going to have to pull more than our share here. Okay, now for the rest of these questions, you will see that there is no single right answer, and in fact, often the real answer is all of the above, but you're going to have to pick one that you think is the best answer according to you among the choices provided. The first one is quite difficult, actually. Let's get started on that one. Hans, help me out here. We need to get question number 1. Okay. What is the most important element of the Paris Agreement for advancing Redd Plus objectives? Is it that there was an endorsement of Redd Plus in Article 5 to strengthen political legitimacy? Was it the ambitious overall goal of limiting warming to 2 degrees centigrade that will focus attention on reducing forest emissions? Was it the language calling for balance between emissions and removals that will focus attention on forests as sinks? Was it the endorsement of internationally transferred mitigation options, those ITMOs that will generate finance? Or was it the submission and regular revision of nationally determined contribution, our favorite indices, that will focus attention on implementation and enhanced ambition over time? You have 10 seconds. Time's up. Very interesting. So, answer number 5 seemed to get the most number of votes. All right, moving on to question number 2. The next 3 questions will be about the national level implementation of Redd+, which will be the focus of our parallel sessions this afternoon. What is the most important constraint on national level Redd+ implementation? Is it lack of awareness of the importance of forests to domestic development goals? Is it insufficient international Redd finance? Is it weak domestic institutions? Is it a lack of political consensus on how to achieve Redd+ objectives? Or could it be strong vested interests in deforestation as usual? You have 10 seconds. Oh my, strong vested interest in business as usual. Sounds like we have something to talk about in some of the panels. Very good. Moving on to question number 3. What is the most promising source of new and additional performance-based finance for Redd+? Is it new pledges of public funding from bilateral donor agencies? Is it Redd+ finance from the Green Climate Fund? Might it be markets for forest carbon offsets from industrialized countries? Or might it be domestic fiscal policies in developing countries? You have 10 seconds. We have a session this afternoon on financing options. Oh, and it looks like there's quite a bit to debate about. But a strong early winner on the domestic fiscal policies. Very interesting. All right. Question number 4. What is the biggest challenge for Redd+ initiatives in the context of transitions to peace? Is it pressure to kickstart economies and employment through logging operations? Is it uncertain land tenure due to returnees and emerging legal reform? Or is it the difficulty of engaging all stakeholders when some may not yet trust the process? You have 10 seconds. Uncertain land tenure. Interesting. Okay, question number 5. What is the most important opportunity or risk linking Redd+ and Indigenous peoples? Is it that Redd+ provides an opportunity to advance recognition of Indigenous peoples' rights? Is it that Redd+ finance can be channeled directly to Indigenous communities? Or is it that Redd+ poses risks to Indigenous peoples, requiring a focus on safeguard implementation? You have 10 seconds. And again, we have a session on this very question later this afternoon. An opportunity to advance Indigenous peoples' rights. Great. I was worried you guys were focusing too much on the last answer in each question, but clearly we're not doing that. Okay, now we're going to move to some questions about subnational level implementation of Redd+. Question number 6. What is the most important constraint on Redd+ implementation at the scale of subnational jurisdictions? Is it insufficient support from national policies and institutions? Is it insufficient finance from national and international sources? Is it that the drivers of deforestation are beyond the influence of the jurisdiction, like a state or a province or a district? Is it that there is insufficient political and economic incentive for transitions to green growth paths? Or is it there is a lack of coordination with those commodity supply chain commitments that we heard about from Eric Solheim? You have 10 seconds. insufficient political and economic incentives for transitions to green growth paths. Very interesting. Okay, moving on to question number 7. What is the most important constraint on REDD+ implementation at the project scale? So the very most local and community-based initiatives. Is it insufficient finance to provide meaningful incentives? Is it that drivers of deforestation are from outside the influence of the project? Is it an inability to resolve land tenure issues at project scale? Or is it the challenge of achieving equitable benefit sharing within communities and within households? You have 10 seconds. We also have a session on this later this afternoon. Drivers of deforestation outside the influence of the project. Great. Okay, question number 8. What are the most promising applications of new technology to support REDD+ implementation? Is it the mapping of indigenous, local community, and smallholder lands to achieve legal status? Is it to use technology for enhanced monitoring to support forest law enforcement? Is it for enhanced monitoring to support implementation of those commodity supply chain commitments? Or is it for more accurate measurement of emissions from deforestation and forest degradation? You have 10 seconds. Pretty good spread, but forest law enforcement seems to come out ahead. All right, last 2 questions that are forward-looking questions. So, looking ahead, at what level should REDD+ proponents target more of their attention compared to the present? Should it be at the level of local projects? Should it be at the level of subnational jurisdictions like states and provinces? Should it be at the national level? Or should it be at the international level? 10 seconds. At the level of subnational jurisdictions. Well, that's very validating because we have all morning tomorrow to talk about subnational level implementation, so this is great. Okay, last question, looking ahead. What is the best way to secure permanence in REDD+ results? Is it to ensure that REDD+ is embedded in all relevant nationally determined contributions, the NDCs? Is it to increase the emphasis on rights and governance in national REDD+ programs? Is it to make stronger links between REDD+ and domestic green economy transitions? Is it to make stronger links between REDD+ and those private sector commodity supply chain commitments? Or is it to increase the level and certainty of performance-based REDD finance? You have 10 seconds. Green economy transitions. Great. So, if you found yourself lacking in confidence in some of your choices as you press the button, you might wish to choose parallel sessions later this afternoon and tomorrow morning to help you become more informed for your voting tomorrow afternoon. Alternatively, if you're one of those people who feels like you already know the right answer and you're really annoyed that so many other people chose the wrong answer, you can make it your business to go to those sessions and use the coffee breaks to convince others that you had the right choice. In the meantime, we've got a great first plenary session to kick off discussion on many of these issues. And I'll ask my fellow panelists now to gradually make their way to the seats on the stage. And while they're taking their places, I am going to cede the podium to my good friend Bjorn Tumir, who is the events producer for this big event, and he's going to share with you some important announcements about logistics and security. So panel, please join me on the stage, and Bjorn, the podium is yours.